Hello and welcome to another episode of The Deeper Pulse. Before we dive in, just a quick heads up that following today's episode, I'll be taking a short break from the main feed of this pod, just for a little breathing room and to prepare for what's coming up next in the Culture series rollout. Now, even though I won't be here for the month of February, I will be over on Patreon, dropping new episodes in the Deconstructing Dogma series, which is really a counterpart to this Culture series. So if that is of interest to you, I hope that you'll consider joining us over there. But first, I have another refreshingly honest conversation to share with you. It's pretty much almost never that I meet a coaching colleague that's willing to critically examine the culty nature of our industry. And let me tell you, I've been feeling pretty lonely around this topic for a very, very long time. Not only lonely, but really pretty confused before I found the language of the cultiverse. If you've been listening to this series, you already know that educating myself around cult dynamics has been a real game changer in my life. I've spoken to this on a personal level quite a bit throughout the series. But also, it's changed things for me professionally, as both a writer and a coach. From the get-go, so very much of how I was trained to run my business, it just didn't sit right with me. But I did what I've always done. I looked around me for social proof. And since it didn't seem to bother anyone else, I just sort of shrugged my shoulders and carried on doing all the things, just because. I'd been taught that that's what works. Now, in case you haven't heard me say it before, the term life coach has always made me feel a little cringy. So why in the hell have I been using some variation of this term to describe my work for 17 years? Well, because coaching was and is the catch-all phrase for helpers who do their thing without regulation or oversight. And while that might sound irresponsible, for me as a cult survivor, that was exactly what felt just right about it. It all started in early 2006 when I was desperately trying to break free from the New Age wellness cult where I had worked in the inner circle for almost 3 years. Circle back to episode 33 to hear that story. Now, fortunately for me, at the time, I was not alone in my desire to separate from all the mindfuckery that was going on in that organization. And so 4 of my work colleagues and I created a sort of women's circle support group. We didn't have any language around our culty experiences, so we avoided that topic altogether, focusing instead on how each one of us would step away and what might come next. The 5 of us would gather in my small apartment once a week, and we'd spend 2 to 3 hours focusing on just one of us. Each woman would have her turn in the spotlight. The rest of us would listen to her frustrations and desires, then take turns reflecting her strengths back to her, scribbling her grandest visions and all of her best qualities onto a large whiteboard. After a couple of months, many tears, and lots of laughter, each one of us walked away feeling just a little bit more validated, and in some small way better equipped to vision ourselves into the future. We all quit the org in close succession, and each of us stepped into something sort of newish. Beauty school, collaborative leadership, stand-up comedy, nature as art. Now, my great takeaway from the group was that I really loved facilitating it. Organizing the flow of each session, zooming in on a singular human, listening deep and sifting through all the cult conditioning to reveal authentic desires. Back in college, I'd worked closely with Rick Snyder, a pioneer in positive psychology, hope, and human agency. And something about what we were doing in that circle reminded me why his work had appealed to me. I knew back then that I in some way wanted to apply what I had learned in the research lab to real life, but I'd never been quite sure how to do it. I'd applied to grad school in the past, had been accepted once, but had never gone. Mostly because I was already drowning in student loan debt, and also because the focus of the programs was always so clinical, and I knew deep down that I really wasn't meant to be a psychotherapist. After I left the org, I learned about this option of coaching, so I looked into a variety of training certifications. I even sat down in some interviews with a handful of coaching mentors and instructors. And honestly, I wasn't really all that impressed. Most of them tried to sell me on their Learn to be a Coach programs, which consisted of a series of trainings where I'd be taught to regurgitate their formulaic methodology, a methodology that felt antithetical to the self-directed agency that I was hoping to inspire. And also, right out of not just one, but two culty organizations, the last thing I wanted was to join another freaking movement, especially one with a figurehead at the top. I wasn't interested in buying into someone else's personal coaching philosophy and the culty language that so often accompanied it. Basically, I was looking for a training program that, as far as I could tell, just didn't exist. Looking back, I'm not so sure that this was discernment so much as hypervigilance. I was pretty gun-shy about communities and trainings in general, and I still had no real understanding of what I'd actually been through. And add to that, I was still very much punch drunk on New Age dogma and magical thinking. I was still in a deluded trance, still part of a culty movement. I just couldn't really see it at the time. And so, armed with my good intentions, I gathered up the best bits from somatic education I'd received, and I started doing one-on-one personal training sessions, which in time evolved into face-to-face conversations. I leaned into my psych degree, attended metaphysical workshops on the law of attraction, and devoured books on humanistic psychotherapy. Feeling both terrified and uncertain, I placed a tiny ad in the corner of my email newsletter. Life coaching, $50 an hour. And then I prayed and hoped for the best. Slowly but surely, I began building a coaching practice. 90 to 95% of my clients came from my dance fitness classes. And it sort of worked, because I had earned their trust somatically first. And because their beliefs were so similar to my own, I was able to provide some of what they were after. Deep listening, personal validation, and high vibe encouragement. As a lifelong empath and people pleaser, I was likable and easy to talk to. And the years I'd spent in the world of cult fitness had taught me how to deliver release valve experiences. And when all else failed, magical thinking was the catch-all formula. Simple solutions were easy to offer if I leaned into New Age dogma. And since so many of my clients were like me, eager to believe, they were willing to pay for the deluded promises that we made to one another. Are you cringing yet? Good, because that's really the point. Now, relative to other coaches out there, I was radically transparent with my clients. I shared openly about my challenges and offered examples from my own personal life. But even so, I wasn't honest with them about the fact that the tools I was peddling weren't really working for me either. I found it difficult to admit to myself, let alone out loud to them, that I too was struggling, feeling lonely and hungry for connection. That I struggled from week to week to make ends meet, which is why I secretly waited tables on the side, working and wishing for a magic bullet remedy for my own anxiety and depression. Even though I was doing my best to model authenticity, the real me was still hidden from view, perfectly poised and package wrapped behind the superficial gauzy glow of love and light. See episode 40 for way more on that. In time, I learned that it was incredibly difficult to make real money as a coach. You know, the kind that you can actually live on, without jacking up your prices or creating a cult-like dependency model. But all of this aside, I was determined to do it differently. So I enrolled in a high-dollar training program that was like most of the programs out there. It focused on how to make money, not so much on client success. The purveyors of this product were serving tens of thousands of individuals, and knowing nothing about my actual skill set, it was hammered into me that there was no room for self-doubt. Your discomfort is simply a lack of self-confidence. Invest in yourself, raise your rates, own your worth. We'll teach you how to create a sales funnel that works while you sleep. You go, girl. They taught me that if I wanted to be at the top of my game, it wasn't so much about the quality of the work I was doing. It was all about quantity. Success meant proving that I was capitalist cult crushing it, evidenced by a massive email list, over-the-top testimonials, and a clickbait website sales funnel that led to loads of cash in the bank. Cha-ching, I'm changing lives, woot woot. And here's where I just want to say that I don't think it's any sort of accident that pretty much all the coaches that are constantly boasting online about how they're rolling in the dough, they're pretty much always coaches who coach other coaches on how to make money. Said another way, the highfalutin moneymakers in the coaching world are preying upon folks who are just trying to do everyday work with real people. And when they apply business boss babe formulas, it simply doesn't math out the same. From 2012 to 2014, I used all of the coercive sales tactics that I'd been taught, built multiple websites to house my online programs, and by 2017, I'd finally proven my online worth. I still wasn't making very much money, but thanks to a new relationship, I was able to finally quit my job waiting tables, and I started coaching full-time. I still refused to contract my clients. Instead, I encouraged them to come and go as they pleased. So I never really made all that much money doing the work that I loved. But damn, I was starting to look good on paper. By the spring of 2019, I just couldn't do it anymore. I still felt like an imposter. Never ever while doing the work, but pretty much always whenever I was promoting it. And I think it's because the placard outside of my door, Life Coach, it implies that I somehow am uniquely qualified to do the impossible, effectively guide others through the uncertain terrain of everyday human existence. And even when I played with titles like clarity or communication consultant, I was just so damned tired of peddling a promise. Why do we need a promise? Well, that, my friend, is the million-dollar question. Quite literally. Because capitalism. And because culture is culty in the sense that when people are paying for a result, they only want to bet on a sure thing. All of that to say, the culture of coaching is highly problematic. It's an industry that relies on a celebrity persona, peddles whitewashed supremacist belief systems, and offers magic bullet promises through coercive and predatory sales practices. So why am I still a coach? I've been asking myself that question for a few years now. And the answer is because the work that I do is something that I genuinely love. And I've found ways to be in relationship with the small pool of clients that I serve without making promises or offering clickbait solutions. Now I just support them individually to find personal language so they can ask better questions of themselves, so that they can come to terms with the fact that there really is no such thing as a one-size-fits-all approach to self-development. I'm honestly not sure how much longer I'll continue doing work as a coach, but I can tell you with damn near certainty that I will never, ever again actively promote myself in that capacity. Because I honestly have no clue how to market a coaching practice without it being all kinds of culty. These are the questions that I've been grappling with for a good long while. I shared a little bit about it in my September interview with Dr. Janja Lalich. That's episode 38 in case you missed it. And she remembered our conversation. A couple of months later, she sent me a link to a podcast interview featuring Kathleen Oh. When I clicked the link, the podcast's host, Sarah Steele, described Kathleen as, quote, a rare breed, a wellness coach who is cynical about wellness in the coaching industry. I knew right away that I had to dive in. Midway through the content, I pressed pause and sent Kathleen a private Insta DM, because damn do I need people like her in my life. I've dropped Kathleen's bio into the show notes, but I want to really let her words, her humility, and her grace speak for itself. I really hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. Good morning, Kathleen.
Good morning, Candice. It's so good to be here.
It's so good to have you. I am just so grateful that Janja Lalich connected us. Actually, she sent me a link to a podcast that you were on, and of course, I reached out to you in the middle of listening to it. That's how much resonance I felt with your words. It was just such a thrill for me to hear someone who's actually been in and is involved in the coaching and wellness industry say so many things that I've been feeling, put language around experiences that I was having. And I haven't had an opportunity, quite frankly, to sit down with a colleague in the coaching industry to talk about some of this stuff. So I just
felt like I need to become fast friends with Kathleen and reach out to her. And it was just such a thrill because you have experience doing podcasts and having conversations like this. So thank you so much for showing up here today.
Yeah. Thank you. And also, even if I have had these conversations, it still feels new and a little bit scary to be, owning some of the work and the problems in the coaching industry as part of my work. So, I hope that anyone listening, with a tender heart and with some grace within themselves and with us, because we're in the midst of exploration. And I remember like full body sweats, thinking about what needed to happen. Like I just was on full trigger defense mode because I knew what was happening was true and I was a part of it. Yeah. So I just thank you for this conversation. And also if anyone's listening, to just give yourself some space to hear and listen to the parts of it that may be hard.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. For the listeners, in terms of how it lands, and also for us having that grace for ourselves, right? Like I feel 100% similarly that I'm just in the thick of it and I'm waking up to certain blind spots and well aware that others are still operating at full tilt. And that's why I feel having conversations like this publicly is so important. It's just demonstrating that reckoning and being in it together.
Yeah. So much. And also, I think a lot of people are kind of in shock about this divisiveness of thoughts and leadership and direction. And this, I hope, isn't that. It's an invitation.
Yes. Yes. People who've been listening to the series know how important it is for me to have that nuance. I mean, the podcast is called The Deeper Pulse for a reason. It's not about superficial black and white, binary responses to things. It's about having these more nuanced discussions. So I'm really excited to dive in with you. And where I'd love to start would be just with your story. If you could just give us an overview, since most of my listeners haven't met you before, if you could just tell us about you and any part of your story that feels relevant to where we're going to go today.
Yes, I'm a coach. And it's interesting, in your last sentence, you mentioned binary and the nuance of our lives. I was raised in a high control family. I was born into intergenerational abuse and experienced childhood trauma. So the nuance and the binary, what you're talking about, in those circumstances, in those situations, my survival, it had to be black and white. There was no middles. Middle is not safe. So in my ways of coping, really, with dysfunctional relationships, I really learned how to become somebody who could survive. And some of those skills actually are incredible. Mm-hmm. And I'm grateful for knowing, the route in which I learned them. It's unfortunate, but I was able to really be quite skilled at knowing how to take care of myself. And so in an early marriage, became a parent and still really carried what I thought I carried, a better version of myself into my relationships and my marriage and my parenting. But really, I just sort of changed the language. I became more radical. I became somebody who wanted to seek alternatives. I was never one for authority because the authority that raised me was not trustworthy. So my love language was lies. And so I brought all of that into my life as a spouse, as a parent, and into my professional life. So what I thought I was undoing, I was just recreating in a new form, which, had somebody told me, I probably wouldn't have believed, because coming out of those types of situations and only knowing how to survive meant that I really just wanted to do better, but it literally did not know how. So I went into social work. Mm-hmm. And I felt that it was a really admirable career to help people like me. But again, even though I went to school, even though I learned the, psychology behind social work and care and the systems that help people, I really hadn't thought that I was the person that needed the most help in those situations. So I really put all my effort into helping others, which ultimately was built on a broken foundation. So through the years, I ultimately burnt out and didn't do a good job as a spouse and a mother, and had to really question like why I was ending up in similar situations, repeating patterns with like friendships as well as professional relationships. And so I concluded that it was me, still radicalized with my thinking, then just upgraded myself into another way of thinking, which was through energy psychology and through positive psychology. And just, again, not sort of working with a foundation that brought me into those places, but just changing up the language and sort of leveling up who I was without really breaking down how I got to be who I was. So I think, it's not a unique story, my story, but it's definitely very humbling to get to a place where, the reason I'm in this scenario where I have caused harm or I have been in high control groups or been part of high control environments, it like goes all the way back to the very beginning.
Mm-hmm. So the groups that you were involved in, would you be willing to share a little bit about the types of groups that when you say high control groups so that the listeners kind of have a sense what that looked like in your experience?
Yeah, it's funny because we were all, I would say, kind of like love and light. It doesn't look like high control.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, what do you mean? We just all want love and peace. That's not, but those systems were controlled with judgment, with, a certain dogma that in order to be this person, you had to eat a certain way and practice a certain type of, structured, not religion, spirituality. And also, the choices of food and healthcare and like all of those things, even though it wasn't like a cult, it was a community of very, very strong, opinionated people that were doing things that felt at the time really important. I felt that this was an important thing to do for myself and for my family. But the rules, like everything, one simple example, like imagining that I would ever give my children formula was like unheard. It was like poisoning my children. So of course I didn't, but I even put my children at risk. And my youngest especially was in a failure to thrive situation, very underweight. And I was determined to breastfeed her. And I did. That was built on something that was beyond what I should have done,
Yes.
The nuance and not having those experiences of nuance where there can be this or that and not only one way.
Right.
So for about 25 years was the high control. And a lot of it truly was in my own mind. And it's kind of a bit awkward to say, well, I wasn't ever in a cult. I was just in every, every cult there was, like, yoga, breath work, like which one wasn't. But, there was never a time where it was in leadership other than the courses and the training that I did take to become a coach. They were questionable, what the ethics were about that. Yeah. So
I appreciate you speaking so eloquently to this premise that I came to when I started my own cult recovery. I didn't recognize myself in a lot of cult dynamic education. There was all this emphasis on it's all about the narcissistic leader. And my experience, my culty experiences, many culty experiences have been in the dynamic of culty culture, of a culture itself that's dogmatic. And yeah, sometimes there's a leader involved, and more often, it's about that ideology that gets internalized and that we become our own sort of cult master in a way internally. And so you just expressed it so beautifully. And I know that I'm not the only person who's going to feel validated by that and why this series has resonated with so many people. I get 1 or 2 messages a day with somebody telling me a story. And 9 times out of 10, there's not a narcissistic sociopath at the helm. It's these ideological frameworks that we internalize. And I think that we were steeped in the same love and light world. And in many ways, I'm still pulling myself out of it in terms of the way that I monitor my own expression. And I was trained to do that and to have conversations with people where we can say the irreverent things that we were never allowed to say, right? This is part of the healing, is doing this out loud. So
yeah, I'm so happy to hear that you hear from people. The community that I was a part of, it was many people because we were friends. It was a friendship circle, but I had parts of my professional life that, like any good boundaryless person, had people in both worlds. I had people that participated in my coaching practice, as well as the studio work that I did with breathwork, as well as psychedelics. And then there was the community of friends, and some of them were in both worlds. So when I left, I didn't leave voluntarily, we were exiled from the community. The only solace I had, the only conversations I had were the conversations that I had in my imagination with podcast hosts that were having these conversations. Like, that's how I found Yanya. That's how, these conversations led me to healing, to recovery, to understanding, to compassion, to forgiveness. So if this is something that resonates with people, there are resources and there are places to go, because at the time it was like an entirely different world. I felt like I was, on a street corner of a city that I never imagined being, with absolutely no roadmap. So I'm really, really grateful that you're here and the people that are listening are, possibly getting some direction and places to go, because it's a really lonely place.
mm-hmm. It is. Yeah. I want to share, sort of leading into this nuanced discussion that we're going to have. I'd like to read, if I have your permission to read from your Substack.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, beautiful. It's a quote that really demonstrates the humility with which you're approaching this and the commonality in our experience. So, it is hard to admit, but I am someone that caused undue influence in my work. I have perpetuated lies and misinformation and unknowingly used manipulative and coercive tactics in my desire to help create a more peaceful and promising world. I used to believe it was simple. The powerful mind could change it all. I had a well-meaning plan for all those suffering, swimming in the ocean of pain. All we had to do was be a big enough believer, where everyone wins, a believer in immense love and radical healing. We could just hit reset and start over from a new place, linking arms on a new earth, newly elevated, expanded, with high vibration, consciousness-raising heroes, all connected through bliss. We thought we were special, and somehow we knew better. Whew. Ding, ding, frickin' ding, gotta say.
Yeah.
Any thoughts you want to share on that?
Yeah. Thank you for reading that. It's also really nice to hear. It really was quite appalling to me that what I was perpetuating was harm and lies and misinformation. I, would like to say every day through my past, most days I feel I'm a good person. I don't intentionally harm people. I'm not a road rager or doing any of those things. I have been, definitely. Sure. I worked through, but like that belief and the dogma behind the belief, really what drove me to believe that is the fact that I came from something so different and so impossibly, it felt anyways, like insurmountable pain. So this idea that there's this other way, that if you could just be a believer in the magic and the bliss and beyond our earthly chains. And it's, it doesn't fall far from Christian heaven and hell. It's this idea that if you are a good citizen, then you will be rewarded. The problem there was in the coaching and in my work as a professional, I really thought I knew better. I thought that people came to me because I had done the thing to be a more positive, more loving person. So therefore, I can show them how to be a more loving, kind, good person. And that doesn't sound that bad, except that that was my agenda. That was what I was taught. I was taught that I knew the way and I could help them find their way based on my beliefs.
Right. Right.
And that is coercion. That is unkind. I can't ever assume that I know better for somebody, ever. That is not fair. And having been taught that as a coach, like, yes, I can help people. I can give, my wisdom, but it's not my agenda that they are doing those things. It's theirs.
Mm-hmm.
And so even if the outcome is good for everyone, like
right.
This blissful world is for everyone. It's not just for me. But me believing that people are capable of doing that, want to do that, they want the same thing. And the very dangerous part of that belief is that when it doesn't work out, the reverse of that is my intention was good. So therefore, there must be something wrong with them.
Right. Yeah.
And to have been taught that and to have believed that and to perpetuate that. And I think people hopefully maybe not be hearing this for the first time, but like, that's dangerous. That is, leadership that is broken and not working from neutrality or from quality. It's working from supremacy and from superiority and from a sense of earned authority. I'm not exactly sure, but I don't want that. I don't want that. I don't want to be told, my way is somebody else's, even though, in many circumstances, I paid for that too. I paid to be told, the way.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so impossible to untangle capitalism and white supremacy and the patriarchy from all of this in terms of how it's created these structures externally, but internally in terms of how we relate to one another, how we guide, how we lead. And even when we have quote unquote good intentions, this idea of supremacy shows up. And I think this piece around like sussing out like what's belief and how is it being projected onto the people we serve in ways that beyond like the superficial ways that we think about it, like, oh, I don't talk about my Catholicism, for example, I'm not Catholic, but just as an example, but in these more subtle ways. And especially in this world of magical thinking where the law of attraction and things of that nature are so accepted as gospel, this idea that if the client isn't getting the outcome based on the tools of magical thinking that we're offering, then there's a deficit in the client. Somehow their vibes aren't right because we've got our vibes aligned. And that's all based on this false premise of magical thinking, right? It's not actually a science, but when you've internalized like I did, it felt like that's how I would apply it. Right? And I believed it. And that's, I think, what's just so I'm marveling at, even in this conversation, is just how do we move forward? And this is part of my next question to you is like, I read that beautiful quote, you just shared and elaborated more on it. When you wake up and you realize, wow, like I was sort of in a trance in this regard and operating in a way that was really out of integrity with my values, my deepest values. Now I'm waking up to that. Like, what does that look like for you? And how have you navigated continuing to do the work that you do? Did it change your approach? Like, tell us a little bit about what that transition's been like.
Yeah, that's a good question. Immediately after realizing, and I think I have to acknowledge that there were parts of my work that were definitely I was undoing my patterns. I was undoing my influence. I was undoing how I was participating in systems. Like these were years of sort of acknowledging. And I saw it in my clients at first. I thought, okay, so these people are actually achieving high levels of success and there's something missing.
Mhm.
Like I was a lot of times I'm on my path too. Like I'm building my career and I'm building what I believe success looks like. And when I see others that get to a certain marker or point in their lives and the emptiness and the unsatisfactory results of those experiences are quite dreadful. So I did start noticing that probably within the last, 8 years. I thought, yeah, this is an interesting thing. It doesn't matter that they're men or that we're women. We're all building ourselves on these systems and these structures. And when the structure fell, it was like, oh, fuck, like this is actually like, this is a lie. This isn't true. This isn't like everything here should be lining up in this way. And it's not like, it's not the chef's kiss. You don't get that. So I was pretty aware of those things, but there were many things that I was blind to. I was blind to being anti-racist. I was blind to being white supremacist. I was blind to white privilege and entitlement, things that I, again, assume because I'm a good person and I'm nice, I get a free pass from. So that came later, but thankfully I did have some awareness around systems of oppression and understanding that there was already some, inaccuracies in what we achieve and when we achieve it and how that looks. So I feel like when I got the big whammy, the big wake up, I had already understood, like there's not just one system, there's many. And depending on how I show up in the world is depending on the things that I am participating in. So again, with the gentleness of the ears of the listener, like understanding that I wasn't racist, but I was definitely not practicing anti-racist work. I wasn't using my entitlement to offer anything to anyone other than, when people came to me, I believed I was doing my best with understanding diversity and races and cultures. But like, I wasn't proactive. I was in something that I thought actually, if I understood what that meant, I probably wouldn't have participated in the ways that I did. But when I understood how to change it and how to be proactive and to be anti-racist, and like, it scared me, which is also unfortunately a product of white supremacy, which is like this perfectionism, this idea that it must be right and it must be a certain way. And like, it is messy and there isn't a way. And to be in a system of colonialism where we're also cut off from our emotions and then understanding, okay, these experiences are real and they're really, really, really scary. And I don't know what to do with these feelings because it's not intellect, it's emotion. And now understanding that I've been cut off from that, whatever system, pick one, whatever system I was bred into, and also I can take responsibility for. But, this is centuries and this is, it's baked into the cake. It's been like this for a very long time. So I had to take a step back and understand, like, yes, I'm participating in this. Is this my fault? Am I, this terrible person? And did I know better? Like all of those questions were really, really scary because my experience of black and white thinking, no middle and no nuance, is that it is right or wrong. It has to be, somebody has to be blamed. Somebody has to take responsibility. This is somebody's fault. And to really just sit with the awareness around that and, not immediately know the answer and not be told how to undo this. Like, I think so many people are like, oh, I'm participating in this thing, fix it. It's like such a knee-jerk reaction. And also, again, in these systems, like that's how we're taught. We have some way of making it somebody else's fault or fixing it with some magical thinking or magic pill. So that was pretty scary. And I have to say, in the beginning, it was very impulsive. It took me like buying courses and buying books and listening to audiobooks and listening to podcasts, kind of in this urgency state of really wanting it to be over and realizing like, hey, this is actually a lifetime. This is not, for the next 6 weeks in a $600 course. This is the life where I'm waking up to and taking responsibility for.
That really lands for me, and it makes me think about the journey I've been on the last many months creating this series, and those moments when that urgency kicks in. And there was a moment where it was actually right after the episode with Yanya, where that urgency was kind of taking over, and I took a 2-month break because I needed to rest down and just integrate what I had learned thus far and not be in this sort of urgent need to get it right. And really what I've been learning, and I'm wondering if this resonates with you, is a lot of it's been about reorienting myself regarding certain emotions that I taught myself that I wasn't allowed to feel. Emotions like fear, emotions like shame, anger, outrage, disgust, all the quote unquote negative emotions, which it's one of my least favorite terms, by the way. Those emotions that I didn't allow myself to feel, which really was what was part of what was contributing and creating this divided self, where I had sort of this cult persona. And then there was me, that was me at home with, a box of mac and cheese. Like allowing myself to actually feel those feelings and to be in the discomfort of learning. And what I hear you saying is that's part of the human experience. And we need to develop a relationship with that if we're going to change things. Like, what are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I want to close my eyes and cover my ears and say la 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 la. And why do we have to talk about discomfort? Yeah, I'm getting more comfortable with it. See, definitely, I learned this idea of urgency is really built on many systems. If it's capitalism, white supremacy, colonialism, there are so many ways that we just have to act because we can't sit in that discomfort. And if we do sit in the discomfort, we might acknowledge that there's a problem.
Yeah.
So the urgency, like the need to just like get there, fix it. So that I just wanted to point out was new. I was like, what? Like there's no, being in survival mode for most of my life, I didn't understand that things didn't have to get done immediately. And the consequence was actually healthier if you sat with something and took time and let it integrate and let it be, let it have a life within itself without, killing it or making it like better, letting it be what doesn't kill you, make you stronger kind of thing. So that feeling was very new.
What, in your mind, is the difference between therapy and coaching?
So there are some technical differences. I believe the primary difference is the training and what people do get, the education that they get based on, a coaching certificate and who's the leadership in that. The coaching industry is not regulated. So the people that are teaching coaching, historically, they don't have a background in coaching because there isn't one.
Right.
So usually that's developed out of their own beliefs or their experiences. So I think it's important to understand if somebody is a coach, what qualifies them to be a coach. And also if they're qualified to be a coach, who is their coach that's coaching them? I think it's really important to look at the lineage of education. And also there is no body of coaching. There's many people that are teaching it based on some educational parameters, but not many. So I think it's important, and maybe this kind of comes into the red flags of coaching, is how much did they pay to become a coach and how long did it take them to become a coach and who was training them to become a coach and how were the trainers trained to become coaches. what you will probably see is a very, very interesting family tree of not a lot of depth or lineage. So that's part of the difference. With therapy, there's a formal education, there's a regulatory body. Most people are trained in accredited institutes or universities. So that's an important distinction. And for me, my background is social work. And then the certifications that allowed me to become a coach, had I had the opportunity, I would have probably had a higher education and fewer certifications, but I didn't have those opportunities. And if you're hiring a coach and somebody's not clear about their education or how they became a coach or are offering their credentials, I think that that's problematic. Most people that are therapists have their credentials and their information listed. Whereas coaches, if they don't, I think it's an important question to ask. And for me, I knew that the education that I had and the work that I had done in the early days was based on New Age spirituality, under the umbrella of energy psychology. It wasn't a studied field. And I was questioning it. I was only, I think, so at this point, I started my practice in 2007. And by 2010, I was getting a little bit curious about why things weren't the way they were supposed to be based on my training. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't always getting the results. It wasn't always effective. So I looked around and wanted evidence-based coaching, things that were actually working. And that led me to positive psychology and solution-focused coaching. So I felt good about that because these were ways that I could educate myself. Each of those programs were year-long programs. They were certification programs with continuing ed universities. And so I felt really like I had been able to do something that felt more like formal in my coaching. And as well as just personal development and being able to fill the gaps, my educational gaps with other learning, I then went into internal family systems and I became an internal family systems informed practitioner. So it has been an evolution, and I'm not ashamed to admit my education and the things and the places where I received learning. In the early parts of my career, I would have, it just mumbled about, right. These are the things, right. Because I didn't really know. The Ontario blah, blah, blah Institute, maybe it's, maybe it's a good place to be educated or not. I don't know. And I did participate often in those early parts of my career. I did participate in training and educating in those unfounded practices. Mm-hmm. And thankfully, I think when I got into the inner circles of those systems of learning, I realized it wasn't to be training that or to be using it as a tool in my coaching.
Mm-hmm. Well, this leads beautifully into, let's just kind of move through some red flags in the coaching industry. One of the things that comes to mind based on what you just said is scope of practice and really understanding, even with training, where that line is and how it gets crossed in terms of coaching and offering perhaps therapeutic approaches to things. Actually, what came to mind immediately is Nexium and the scope of practice in terms of an EM, for example, an exploration of meaning exercise, and how it's sort of this therapeutic practice that's being done in this large scale. And in a lot of instances, my experience in witnessing the coaching industry and being in it is a lot of these techniques are borrowed from, popular psychology or cognitive behavior therapy or whatever. And they're implemented in a capitalist structure, and they try to make it like this formulaic, systematized thing. And I think a lot of coaches are guilty of this as well, not properly trained in a technique that is something that a trained therapist needs to be doing one-on-one with somebody, but then they're sort of trying to replicate it and apply it across the board to all their clients and not understanding scope of practice. What are your thoughts on that in terms of scope of practice?
Yeah, that's a good question again. because most coaching, from my experience, scope of practice isn't really taught. It's like,
Right.
if you can be a coach and you have the skills to, change somebody's mindset and make it their problem to solve, because that is how the coaching industry sees it, then it takes the onus off the coach. It puts it onto the client. And therefore, the coach, regardless of the outcome, doesn't have to take responsibility. I do think that the whole idea of trauma-informed is dangerous. To say that somebody's trauma-informed, I would like to know based on what.
Uh-huh.
And I think that trauma is definitely something that people need to have experience with. And I do identify as trauma-informed. I have also worked in trauma and been educated in a way that allows me to say that.
Mm-hmm.
It's not because it's my own trauma. In some cases, it is. And thankfully, and unfortunately, I was deeply harmed by a person practicing as a coach that wasn't trauma-informed in a system that they were not trained in. It was kind of like, oh, I saw this on TV, let's try it.
Right.
And my internal system was disassembled in a very, very, very dangerous way. And for me, had I not had the support that I needed at the time, a good therapist, a mastermind program that I was working with a person that was trained in a doctorate in psychology, like there were many systems that helped me out of that. But in the moment, had I not had the people outside of that experience, I may have had to been hospitalized because of what had happened literally on a 10-minute phone call with an untrained coach.
Wow.
And so I have experience. And because of that experience, I became a trained professional in that system.
Right.
Because I never, ever, ever would have wanted that to be anybody else. I didn't want it to be me, but I learned from that. And so I know that's a really important thing, to really make sure that whatever people are saying, anybody can say anything. My husband mentioned the other day, 70% of people think they're a good driver. They would identify as a good driver.
Right. Right.
And if you say, are you a good driver? I'm going to say yes, I am a good driver. But based on what? And so the coaching industry, people that are practicing as coaches, and myself included, I have to be accountable. There are people I'm accountable to. There are people that will call me out. There are places where I can go to when I need support, not only personally, but professionally. And I also know what I don't know. If I have a client that brings something to me and I know that I'm not capable of handling it, I will say, for their sake and for mine, it's not something I know how to deal with.
Yes.
And I'm okay with that. I think it's good for everyone. I do have a full practice. I continue to practice as a coach. Some of my clients I've been with more than a decade, those clients have, grown and worked with this transition. And I've been honest about it. And we've all sort of acknowledged that maybe there could have been things that we could have done better in the past. And also, I built a reputation with those people that I will always call myself out if I need to. So whether that means the cost of our coaching relationship or not, it's an important place to be. And I don't see my clients as a source of, my next vacation or my next expensive item. I want it to be a sustainable job and career that allows me to continue to do a good job. And I sense this will lead into pricing.
Yeah. You sense correctly.
I wonder So that, again, I have to be able to do this work and sustain myself doing this work. And financially, that requires my, income to match my ability to work. I don't want to inflate my prices. And I also know that at a certain time in my life and earlier on in my career, when my prices were like affordable, I could not actually be the best version of myself as a coach because the only thing I was concerned about was paying the bills and also who was my next client. So I'm in a position where I can work with fewer clients and I do have a full roster and I'm able to work with the people that are, being honest with themselves and being honest with me and want the work to help them be better, like however that looks. So it's good to know what their prices are right up front. So you know what you're getting into and also what they're getting for that price and how long has this person been doing this work in order to, last year, my husband received a 3% salary increase. Like what is a normal range of people, what they are paying and what they can afford and what, I'm not going to double my price because I want to spend less time working. I want to be able to have people afford my work and work for what I'm earning to do the job that I feel really, really proud of and that people feel that they are getting the quality of that work. And based on what I'm doing, it's working.
Well, and it sounds like your emphasis is on that one-on-one support. And one of the things that became really distasteful to me when I was really steeped in the industry and myself, in all transparency, the training that I was investing in the most was the business training around my coaching empire that I was building, which is really how the coaching industry, like that's what's sort of shoved down your throat is like, take this training from this coach who can tell you how to build your coaching business into, 6 figures in a year, just all this just noise in terms of when we're really, the real motivation for me was always serving people and finding better ways to serve people. And yet at the same time, when I felt that financial urgency, which is 100% why I always have had a side gig when I coach, always, because I knew what happens to me when my nervous system is hijacked and how it compromises my ability to serve. And so when I was in the thick of that though, and I was taking those programs, you can get around this whole, like what you're speaking about in terms of the incremental salary increase and what's reasonable for a person to be charging. Well, you can sort of get around that if you create these programs where you have these tiers and you move through people through this sales funnel process where they're sort of coming in at this low price point, and then you love bomb the shit out of them and give them some value, and then you ask them for the next thing, and you're continually dangling a more expensive carrot on a stick the whole way, and it works. I was trained in sales pages that work like a key in a door, I tell you what. And it just all felt really icky to me. I stepped away from every bit of it after capitalizing on it for about a year or two. And I just have a lot of respect for the integrity you're bringing to like what you're really doing in terms of the service that you're providing as a coach, and that it isn't about building some sort of business empire. So do you have any thoughts about the way that bait and switch sales funnel things operates? It's particularly, it's sort of triggering to me because it's something that I've done in the past, but really sort of what pisses me off when I see it happening is the love bombing, like the coming at someone with just this ooey gooey promise. And I've bitten that line so many times that, the exos and the hearts and the everything, and come and I'll be your mama, basically. Like, it's just so dysfunctional, and I have a lot of thoughts around it, obviously. I want to hear what you think.
Oh, this is a good question. I have also had those. I would have liked to have been your mama. And I wanted that so badly. But I failed. I was one of the unlucky ones. And as many people, may not admit, how many people get sucked into those funnels and are told you're the next whatever person that's going to be 6 or 7 figure internet fame. I wanted that pretty badly. In 2015, I built this machine. It was a online program, and I built it on a system that I paid, I don't know, $10,000, $25,000 for. I think this system was like 5,000, and then you upgraded to the inner circle and it was another 5,000. And then you're like one-on-one coaching, which is another, everything I wanted came at the cost of, another couple $1,000s. So at the end of the year from 2017, the best and worst year of my life, I had spent over $100,000 on building to basically be like my online ATM. And my best friend and I were like parallel building these systems. She was doing the DIY version and I had the fancy team because I could afford it, and which made me feel fabulous.
Right.
And I was already winning. Like I was literally at the top of the mountain before I even took my first step. So she built her system on the exact same premise. The funnel, the this, the that. And I did it as well, but I had all the tech work done by a really expensive team. All the graphics, all the content, all the back end, it was really elaborate. And hers was really scrappy. And mine failed badly. Not only because I was selling a really shitty product, because I just wanted to make the most out of what I had. And I'm not even going to tell you what it was because it was a coaching program that, was a sure win because it was a vulnerable group of people. They would want what I had, and I had the way and all that. And not only was it just a really very greedy way of making a lot of money for me, I was in it to win it. I just wanted the money. And what happened was I paid a lot of money to people who also wanted a lot of money, but actually they weren't doing the job. They were a scam.
Shit.
Yeah. Oh. And so I was, I got scammed while trying to scam people.
Wow.
Which interestingly I obviously didn't know it was a scam, but it started in January, it ended in December, and it was literally lights out overnight. And I continued to throw money at this thing because I wanted it so badly. Whereas my friend was building and building and building exactly the same thing on her terms. And she was actually becoming successful. She became a 7-figure business in, 3 to 4 years of opening and operating the way she did. And we were both using coercive tactics. We were using language to manipulate people. We were using pain points. We were using the things that we were taught. The internet guru that I learned from said, we have to be a hope merchant. We have to sell hope. Mm-hmm. What the fuck are people buying hope for?
Right. Yeah. Red flag, right?
Right. I apologize for using that language.
You do not need to on this. All the language is welcome here.
Okay. But thankfully, what I learned from that year is that I was somebody who was very susceptible to these promises. I was targeted. These are predatory marketing. Like I said, lies are my love language. I will, be the best friend to a perpetrator in minutes if they're giving me something. Mm-hmm. That's who I was. And I was smart enough to know, because I was told, even with the $100,000 price tag, that the entire reason why it failed was because of my mindset. And I 100% knew that it was more than that, mm-hmm. and that there was something going on that I couldn't see. And I didn't know what it was. And it took many years to actually undo a lot of those systems that I had got myself caught into. And the reason why I didn't know it is because it's all I knew.
Yes. Yes.
That's all I knew.
Mm-hmm. And as a consumer, That's also true, right? It's like it's true both as the purveyor, the coach, the person who's marketing themselves, and these are the models that are available. This is what we're taught to do. This is how we do it. And then also as consumers, I feel that we are likewise conditioned to respond to these things because that's how sales works. I mean, it's mind-boggling to me now, standing where I stand, what I perceived as acceptable on both fronts, like as a coach and as a consumer. And I, same as you, super susceptible to the, like I stay away from sales pages like they're the plague because I know they're gonna reel me in, like still to this day. And still also really susceptible to charismatic individuals who carry themselves with great authority. Like it's my Achilles, and I have to be super mindful of how it's like the lens of my eyes changes and my ears shift in terms of how I'm hearing them and what I'm seeing based on the amount of authority that they come forward with. So, like all of these things, I think not only as coaches who are perpetuating these dynamics, but also as consumers, I think this conversation is so important for us to, well, for me to help myself to wake up to the dynamics and how they're operating and when I'm taking the bait. And for the listeners out there, when they're thinking about doing anything, this is the norm. This is how, like, predatory sales tactics, like you just said so beautifully, that's the norm in terms of how we get people and pushing pain points, all the things you listed, which thank you for laying them out so plainly. They're actually a lot of the red flags we were going to touch upon, right? Just, and as you say them, that's the interesting thing. I think most folks are going to know exactly what you're talking about, even if they've never, been diving deep into unraveling all of this, because we know what it feels like when we're being preyed upon, even if we take the bait.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'll just question that, whether we know. For me, it was so normal. It was like the air I breathed to be told that I wasn't enough and I needed to spend, X number of dollars to be more, or to find the next thing that was going to make me feel more. That, as a person who believed that, I didn't have any other, I didn't have other references to know that I'm okay. Like, right. I never had I don't have the framework to know that I'm okay. So anybody that is going to, except for myself, which now I've learned is actually enough. Like, I don't need somebody to tell me that I am worthy. I also don't need somebody to tell me that I'm broken. But if somebody does tell me that I'm broken, I have had most often my experiences to believe them.
Yeah.
Even after, 25 years of therapy and all of the things that I've done. And the interesting thing too, back to the coaching, if we just look at the word coach with the athletic lens, from, somebody's first attempt at a sport to the Olympics, whoever that is promising the Olympics, if that's what the goal is full of shit. Like, they're not. They cannot. And from that moment that person became that athlete, of the time they won the gold medal, did not happen in 1 year. 6 figures typically cannot happen, like whatever that promised land is. And if it does, like for my friend, she was in a really great position for her work. I think her business became a 7-figure business in her 4th year. She had multiple 7-figure years, and then the wheels fell off. Like everyone, the poking holes in language, poking holes in these marketing. And she actually voluntarily took the wheels off. Like, she said, this is not okay. I am doing something that isn't okay. And even when she was doing it, because had my system worked, I would have felt great, because I was working with that person within myself that didn't feel value. And so I was building it on the system that told me I would get value. Yeah. And when she was building her system, she was building it like we were working with the same brokenness. My brokenness led me to broke, and her brokenness led her to rich. But Like we had, I feel it's okay she's been very public about this, that it's okay to say like, she did it in a way that was not okay. And it worked. And now she's figuring out a new way. And, one of the things with cultic belief systems or the marketing, the online world, the coaching world, like we have not been taught that changing our mind is safe. We've been shown that you do this thing and you keep doing this thing and you have to do this thing.
Right.
And, I don't know people, many, there's a lot of them up top that are continuing in the coaching world are doing what they're doing because it's working. And it's working based on really, really very questionable practices.
Yes.
So asking those people to give up their $1 million salaries or, one of those coaches had recently put out in a recession, how to recession proof your business. And at the same time was saying this is how they built a $70 million business. Like, yeah, they built a $70 million business on people who are desperately trying to save themselves from losing everything. And like, bless that person if they can go to bed at night thinking that they, took somebody's last $3,000 and hope that it works out. Because that person, I absolutely know that person was trained by the same person that I was trained to sell hope. And so if that person can put themselves to bed at night with their $70 million business and selling people hope, then that's what they're going to continue to do and not ask the questions. So,
which circles us back to that discomfort and having that ability to really examine our motivations and what's really going on. And I think it really points to how I was taught to think / not think in terms of demonizing the ego. And that, what I have witnessed and know to be true about myself is that when I attempt to reject some part of myself, that the shadow looms larger and the dysfunction comes in with greater force. And I think this happens a lot in the world of coaching, particularly new age coaching and wellness. And that there's this sense of rejecting these parts of self that then are operating in the background with that much more vigor and purpose. And that there's a real sense of, I had my blinders on in terms of like what you spoke to. I really can very much relate to this, not feeling like I'm enough, sourcing that from childhood, always taking the bait around, here's the next thing that's going to make you good and make you enough. And then feeling like, well, that's not what I'm doing. Like if I look at what's happening unconsciously, or if I bring awareness to the fact that I have wounds, for example, which is like a bad buzzword in a lot of yoga communities that I've been involved in, like, oh, wounds, like when we're running from our wounds, the way that shows up is often as dysfunction that we then inflict on others. What are your thoughts around that and this whole idea of the ego being the enemy, and anything there jumping out at you?
I have thought, you need to just not be coming from your ego because that's dangerous. And I'm very friendly with my ego because I now know like who I am is because of that, regardless. And it isn't something that I need to overcome or banish. And I'll come back to that exact ego word, but I realized that my condition in relationships and my unworthiness and the things that I often would not ever admit out loud and or even to myself are, that whole experience of getting involved, getting sucked into the machine of online business. Like there's so much shame there. And there's so much like, it is embarrassing to admit that I am a coach that really messed up badly in this way. And what I have understood in these last probably 3 years, that how I operate in the world comes through my experiences. And the easiest way to identify what this is for me without sounding like I'm a label is complex PTSD. Mm-hmm. And having that experience in my life, like I said earlier, it taught me how to survive and also taught me who I am in my dysfunction, because that was how I survived. I had to do that. And thank God for my ego, because that is what gave me my personhood. Yes. To be protecting in my life, even if it wasn't under the greatest circumstances. So that's who I am. And if this is my ego, and I can identify that these are the ways that I operate, and I acknowledge my patterns, then I can work with that. But if I'm like, oh, this is something that I need to banish and overcome, then I'm always going to be just walking around with this thing that I can't actually own or take responsibility for or acknowledge. And that problem becomes somebody else's problem. Yeah. And it's mine. I will keep this. It's mine. I earned it. Right. And I understand what it is. Like, if I didn't let myself bring it into the light and, be really honest with myself, I'd only be half of myself. I would be myself and this other part that I can't deal with. Mm-hmm. And me not being able to deal with that part is not actually fair. That I put myself out in the world and expect other people to deal with that. Right. When I'm not willing to do it.
Right. Beautifully articulated. Yeah. So are there any other red flags in terms of the coaching industry that you really want to name before we wrap up our conversation today? I know there's a lot of them, and if there's one that you have a burning desire to speak to.
So a big issue, other than the trauma-informed red flag, if people are not upfront, if they're defensive about anything that they're offering, they question that. If anybody asks me a question that I can't answer, I'll say I can't answer it. But if I become defensive about it, it feels really problematic. Yeah. And also the idea of ethics is very, very questionable. If somebody is selling ethics, that makes me really uncomfortable. Nancy Salzman stood at front of the teaching classroom in the second season of The Vow with a t-shirt written ethics on it. Like, it's a buzzword. It's hot. It's saleable. Yeah. It's what people want because they don't want the discomfort. There are programs that are selling ethical coaching. It makes me want to cry, because if somebody is selling you ethics, is that ethical?
Right. Yeah.
Like, what are you doing? It's like, I am selling you my belief. Mm-hmm. Would you buy it? And it's not fair. I want you to understand your ethics based on your work and your values and respect and honesty and all of those things that as good people we practice, but we practice because we're holding ourselves accountable and being responsible. I don't want to be in anybody's presence if they're telling me they're ethical and not showing me what that means. Self-assigned ethics, like, it's like, I'm a good driver. I don't know. Yeah. But I would like to say there are people in front of me that will tell me if I need to be better at something. And I have put those people in place. I have people that are smarter than me. I have people that look different than me. I have teachers that are in a completely different field that are willing to say, this is how we see it. And these are our questions about it. So maybe you could do it this way, because I don't know everything. Right. I don't want to know everything. And I have like Yanya is an incredible mentor. And I'm fortunate to have been her student. And the teaching that's coming out of the Lalich Center has, in the past when she was teaching on a different platform, that literally changed my approach to my work and myself, and knowing what somebody who has been in an industry for decades, who is the top of the top in terms of these experiences and is willing to share them. Those are the people I trust. And those are the people that I want to hear from and learn from. And, having the ability to work with teachers like Jarette Bouillon, she has been a great mentor to me in my writing. My best friend, Tarzan K, who is also deconstructing and unlearning and teaching what she knows, because what she used to teach was questionable. Now she's, correcting course and being honest about it. My husband, he and I think are smart and capable, and we challenge each other. And I want that in a relationship. I don't want somebody who's going to agree with me. I would like to have different conversations and be safe in those conversations. And I don't want to, pad my pockets with people that are just going to placate me and tell me that I'm wonderful. I don't want that. It helps me grow when I have these conversations and in a way to be in the world and to see the world that's different than my own view. So I want to point people to good resources. Maggie Patterson on Instagram, she's coming out hot in 2023 with some of her red flags around coaching, around the online business.
Well, we will definitely, you rattled off so many great resources. And so I'll make sure to link to all of those individuals in the show notes, and you can help me line up the details.
Absolutely.
How can people stay connected to you who want to learn more about you and your work?
Well, the best place to find me is on Substack, because I have a very unfriendly history with Instagram. So, ohmyheart.substack.com is my weekly newsletter. I talk about these things there. I also am a safe drug use advocate. So I talk about psychedelics and safe drug use. I also talk about recovery from the cult and intergenerational trauma. I talk a lot about my recovery through my writing. I want to be a writer. I don't know what that looks like.
You
but
are a writer.
I'm dabbling, but I also have my main website, which is Coach Kathleen Oh.com. And Instagram is The Real Coach O. But I am most interesting on Substack.
Okay.
And on my Spotify playlists, actually. My Spotify name is DJKO.
Oh, okay.
And I have this weird fascination. I have 153 playlists.
Oh my gosh, I'm so going there. I'm so excited.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to dig into that. And I love that we're wrapping on that note, because, after sitting down and talking through all this, going outside, moving and listening to your music feels just right. So thank you so much, Kathleen, for agreeing to do this. It's so valuable, everything that you've offered here. And I've learned a lot today. And you've given me a lot of language that I've been seeking. So I just appreciate your time so much.
Well, I appreciate being here. And I was so flattered when you're like, I'm halfway through. I need to talk to you. We need to be friends. And, I'm a bit reluctant. I'm reserved because, again, I had to rebuild trust within myself and know that I'm ready. And also that I'm not at the end, and I'm barely through the beginning of something that has been really, really, really hard and so worth it. When I realized I had to change, I really just wanted to run away from it or just keep doing the same thing like all those other people. But it has been the best decision. I know at the end of the day, the work that I do is valuable and important, and it makes a difference. And in the past, I would have said the same thing and felt like I meant it. But now I know, I do know, I can be honest with myself. And I hope that people will give themselves permission to just explore this, because I know the anxiety that comes with uncertainty and disconnection. And this isn't that.
Well, you're setting a beautiful example, and walking this path with humility is a big part of it. And in sharing what you just shared, just gave me a real gift of validation. It's bringing tears to my eyes. I did run away. I closed my business doors and I literally left the country and traveled abroad for 4 months. I was like, I can't do this. I can't face this. And I sort of opted out for quite a while. And then facing all of this in the last year or so has been really, really challenging. And so to hear you say what you just said is just really deeply meaningful to me. So thank you for being an example and being courageous and being in the messy middle with me. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Let's link arms.
Let's do
and
it.
Stick in the mud.
Exactly. Just wade on through.
Sit in the mud and just link arms and look at each other and say, what the hell?
Exactly.
Why are we here?
Yeah.
The best place to be right now.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Yep. It's honest. Okay. It's honest. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Candice.
I loved this conversation, and I hope you did too. And that you took time to jot down some of the resources that Kathleen so generously offered us. There's so much more to her and her work. So if you want to learn more about Kathleen, follow the links provided in the show notes. I'll be back with you on March 1st to pick back up with the Culture series. I'm super excited for where we'll be heading next. To give you a quick preview, I'll be sitting down with the founders of the #IGotOut movement. I'll be sharing a heartfelt and bittersweet conversation with a survivor of the troubled teen industry, and circling back to an earlier episode with an inspiring story of healing and recovery as it relates to intergenerational cult trauma. All of that and more to come. In the meantime, throughout the month of February, Tracy and I will be dropping bonus episodes over on Patreon. So if you haven't checked it out yet, we hope to see you there. That's patreon.com/The Deeper Pulse. And if you have a story you'd like to share or a private message you'd like to send me, you can reach me at thedeeperpulse.com/share. Thanks for tuning in. Take care of you and yours, and I'll see you in a few weeks.